Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today we got our first teaser information about the new bow skills that are coming in Conquerors of the Atlas. So these are things that you'll be able to play with as soon as the 3.9 League launch happens on the 13th of December. You don't need to wait until Path of Exile 2 comes out, possibly next year, possibly at the start of 2021. So, as part of the Conquerors of the Atlas expansion, we're doing a full review of bow skills, so get ready for Tornado Shot to get nerfed, and other mechanics that influence bow balance. Ranged Attack Totems have been underutilized for a while, and we made some significant changes to their core mechanics, as well as added some interesting new abilities which are unique to the archetype. So if you've never used a Ranged Attack Totem, that wouldn't surprise me if you've started playing in the last 2 years or so. Essentially, what they do is they allow you to put down a totem that fires a copy of your bow. However, they start out, by the time you get them to level 20, the gem, each totem does 74% of the baseline damage of your bow's attack skill and has 30% less attack speed. So, this means effectively you're doing half damage with this, 51.8% damage at gem level 20 on this support. And this is coming at the expense of potentially using a different support gem that would add damage. So it's a tremendous, tremendous decrease to the amount of damage that you're doing. And this is a problem that currently just can't be overcome really by any other options. Yes, you can get additional totems, but even if you do that, even if you get every other realistic source of additional totems, remembering that the Shaper Shield mod is not compatible with using a bow, you end up just not being able to get the damage that you would get when you're using your bows yourself. There were some bonuses to using Ranged Attack Totems, the main one of them being that back in the days when Reflect was genuinely deadly, you wouldn't be able to accidentally kill yourself by firing into a pack of monsters which had Reflect. Instead, what would happen is your Ranged Attack Totem would take the bullet for you because the damage would be reflected to it. However, Reflect was nerfed hard enough a few patches ago that that's no longer really particularly relevant. And so essentially, Ranged Attack's Totem has sort of lingered in the game as one of the least used skills as one of the least used support gems that exists. So here's the changes that are coming. Ranged Attack Totem's skills are now called Ballistas, with the existing support gem being renamed to Ballista Totem Support. So this is just a flavor thing. It's kind of cool, but it doesn't really have any impact on the game. All Ballista skills start with 3 maximum totems, as does Ballista Totem Support. So the default was 1 under the game previously, 2 if you took Ancestral Call, which had a huge cost. You pick up more by being a Hierophant, but it was, broadly speaking, not worth your while considering any of those options. Now, starting with 3, it's looking a lot better. You're going to be able to put down multiple of these and get some real damage out of them. And Ranged Attack Totem Support, Ballista Totem Support, will now actually be a considerable more multiplier to your damage. Ballista Totems place much faster than other totems, letting you quickly deploy your full power. This is huge. This is absolutely critical for them to be useful. Now, here's the nerf that's interesting. Ballistas are all placed quite close to your character now. This makes your positioning important. However, it isn't a large disadvantage as many of the Ballistas have a long firing range. So, what's happening here is that the ability that is inherent to totems of being able to fire very effectively around corners is largely being removed. In the current state of the game, if you can see a particularly terrifying monster that's hiding around a corner, and Abaxith is a good example of this. Abaxith, the end of all it is, the sort of top boss of the Beyond content, is one monster that you generally see, that you'll generally abuse line of sight to kill because he's so damn dangerous. You used to be able to block line of sight to the monster and then stick up a Ranged Attack Totem somewhere the monster could see that they couldn't see you. They'd then attack that, and if the monster repositioned, you would reposition so that you never had line of sight to them. This strategy is gone. However, I think it's such a niche in the current state of the game. The game currently is so fast that a very slow, methodical, and safe method of killing individual bosses just wasn't that important. So that's gone, but it won't really matter that much for most players. New passives have been added to this passive tree specific to ballistas and other attack totems. letting you gain additional Ballista totems. Now when they say other attack totems, here they will undoubtedly mean Ancestral Warchief and the other version of the Ancestral Totems. So that should be interesting. I think they're really trying to establish that it is possible to build a character primarily out of Ranged Attack Totems, which has been possible in the past, but generally hasn't been a popular way of building for a long time. Now there's the outright new skills. So that's the first overwork, and that's actually the only overhaul that we got any information on today. There will be more overhauls, but they're just not getting the details. Shrapnel Blister is the new low-level bow totem. So this is its own Ballista skill. It fires 3 projectiles at once, and an enemy can be hit by multiple projectiles from a single shot. So this is a return to the days of being able to hit an enemy multiple times with one shot, if you're able to get them in the range of it. So this makes the skill particularly deadly when up close to enemies. Has a small amount of added physical damage, making the skill more reliable when leveling. That's an absolute godsend, that line. If you're stuck with a really terrible bow while you're leveling, this will help you out a lot. Additional projectiles further multiply the damage. This again is because of the overlap, and these sorts of skills are inherently more dangerous when used against large enemies. Use it to take down a boss quickly, or place multiple to create a line of defense that destroys any enemy that approaches. Now, one spot that I can see this being particularly useful is against bosses like Exile when you're leveling. You drop down a couple of Shrapnel Blisters and let them do the heavy work while you focus on dodging the boss's attacks. If you can keep Exile close to the Shrapnel Blisters, then fantastic. If you can't, well, the ones that are further away are only going to land 1 hit on them at a time, but the ones that are up close will deal 3 or 7 in conjunction with greater multiple projectile support. Next up we have Artillery Ballista, which is a new level 28 skill. This one's cool, and I'll show the video of it in action, but it looks like it's got a lot of potential. It fires up a series of arrows that rain down in a line with all damage converted to fire. Now the benefit of converting all damage to fire is that it enables you to scale it via things like fire penetration, which don't really exist for other types of damage. Well, they do exist for other types of damage, but if you can convert everything to fire this way, you only need to worry about one type of penetration gem. So that's something that can give you quite an extra boost, not in the amount of damage that's on your tooltip, but in the amount of damage you actually apply to enemies. Additionally, there's all sorts of shenanigans available when you're converting damage to fire. I'll need to see the actual gem itself, the precise text that's used, which isn't revealed yet, in order to get a sense as to how this works with various effects that add chaos damage based on the amount of fire damage that you deal, such as the Atzuri Flask. The skill has a similar damage pattern to Glacial Cascade, but unlike Glacial Cascade, the line isn't directly away from the totem. Instead, it looks at the positions of nearby monsters and intelligently rains its arrows down in a diagonal line that would hit as many enemies as possible, making it very efficient at clearing out spread out enemies as well as dealing multiple hits to targets. So, where this is going to be really good is against bosses that have a bunch of adds that stay close to them. There's not that many examples of that, but there are some. And also just for general map clearing. I think, broadly speaking, you might want to consider Shrapnel Ballista for your clearing of trash through maps, and then Artillery Ballista for bosses. Oh, sorry, the other way around. Shrapnel Ballista for bosses and Artillery Ballista for trash, but I do want to see them both in practice before I actually lock that in as a definite suggestion. It may still be that Elemental Hit combined with the new Ballista Totem support might just be better. Lastly, we have Ensnaring Arrow, which is a new utility bow skill that fires a single arrow when it hits and doesn't pass through an enemy. So when it actually locks on an enemy, no chain, no fork, no pierce. A rope shoots into the ground, pinning the monster to that point. If they try to move from that point, they're greatly slowed. An enemy can have up to 3 ropes attached to it, each applying a separate speed multiplier. This is a pretty impressive sounding skill, but one that I need to see in practice. This is something that you'll probably drop down for the tougher bosses. There's a number of bosses that get a lot easier when they're slowed down. A good example of a boss that is much harder at high speed is the Guardian of the Phoenix. Now, with the Shaper Guardian overhaul that's coming in 3.9, discussed in another video, they're going to be a lot rare. It's going to be a lot rarer that you'll fight the Guardian of the Phoenix. But there's plenty of other bosses like that. So it'll be quite interesting to see how Ensnaring Arrow works in progress, in actual practice. In addition to the slow, it also increases projectile attack damage taken and makes enemies always count as moving. So if you can use Puncture on an ensnared enemy, you can guarantee a full force bleed, which is really quite interesting. Puncture's been in a terrible place for a long time. This might just make it better. Additional projectiles let you pin multiple enemies at once, while Ballista Totem lets you create a totem that ensnares enemies for you while you kill them with your other abilities. So anyways, let's jump over to the video and demonstrate these in action. So this is Shrapnel Blister, the short range one, and you can see there that someone's adding cold damage to it. Here's Artillery Ballista. You'll see that they're in lines, so each shot is landing in lines. It's a bit hard to follow sometimes. This is Split Arrow with Ballista support, and you can see there that it's just got great coverage. Rain of Arrows with Ballista support, and it's just firing arrows everywhere. You can see so many of them going up. Looks kind of nuts. And that's what we've got there at the moment. So anyways, I'm quite excited to see how these play in practice. It's too early to think on any actual build guides for them. I do think though that it's going to be quite possible to build a character that uses Artillery Ballista as its area of effect clear, and that uses Shrapnel Blister for killing bosses specifically. Once we get some actual numbers on the gems, which usually isn't until about 3 days before the launch of the league, then at that point I'll be able to put something together. Anyways, gonna leave it there. Any questions, fire away below.